at the start of the show, I was just talking about the brutality of the Republican Party and the, the fascism, the further and further right that they go, and the voters will always follow them, right? It doesn't. You have the radicalization that is such a threat to people and to the United States, and with these strategies, it seems like campaigns are not equipped to really reckon with it and combat it based on these outdated strategies. And you talk about that a bit. Can you expand on that point?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm really worried about the future of this country, really, both, just as a person who cares about other people, as a transgender man, as a parent of children with uteruses, as, someone who cares about racial and I could go on and on, right? I think we all are. And I really worry that the Democrats are not doing what they need to do to bring enough people out in the next election and the election after that. I hear so many people I know saying, and this is actually part of another research project I have as well, saying, the people in power don't care about me. They're not doing anything to help me. They don't, they're not interested in me and people like me. And so why should I vote for them? And it's really hard to change that kind of worldview with yet another ad saying after the next election we'll be able to do
yes.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Even if it's true, right? Like, it is true that there are real reasons that the Democrats are not able to deliver on a lot of things that they, I think, would like on some level to deliver on. And as a message, it's, there's very little evidence that any ad moves anybody ultimately to vote in the next election, especially when they're also seeing ads from the opposing team. And B, there's only so many times you can hear that. And so I think, or, whatever the message is, if the message is, vote for us or there will never be abortion rights again, like, I hope that scares some people into voting for the Democrats who might not have otherwise. But again, the fear or the promises over and over again coming at you from a TV screen doesn't really make that much difference to most people. I think what can make a difference to most people, and this is what I said in the beginning, is, an actual person who says, hello, I'm from the Democratic Party. I'm interested in what you'd like to see happen. I'm interested in you. What can we do to get your vote in November? What can we do even beyond that? If I had a magic wand, there would have been organizers on the street from the Democratic Party starting in January 2021, just going and talking to people. I think that's the thing that can shift politics, that can move people to being willing to take the time out of their day and come out and vote when they need to. But only if it's, some kind of genuine, and only if it's done on a really large scale.
So let's talk a bit about that, the midterms coming up here then, because, we have on the show talked a lot about the perils of the obsession with the suburban voter who's disaffected by Trump, by the Democratic Party. Now, I guess I'll just ask you on your take there, because that seems to be the only voter that leadership and the president seems to think is going to tilt the scales here. And, you're a trans man. They've largely, I think, been completely dropped the ball on aggressively combating these anti-trans, don't say gay bills throughout the country. They're terrified to engage in the culture war because they probably look at some polling metrics and think, let's not go there. I'm always in favor of a more aggressive strategy on that front. But the fact that they do not see the value in an intersectional national campaign that's going to protect trans people, gay people, women, people who can get pregnant in the face of these abortion rulings is just maddening to me. And I'm wondering what your take is on that as somebody who has worked on campaigns and also studied them to this degree.
Yeah. I think I agree with you that the focus on the sort of almost, I don't know if mythical is quite the right word, but almost sort of legendary suburban swing voter is ill-advised. I understand where it comes from, right? You look at the numbers and you look at the polls and you figure out who's your, which demographic you are most likely to be able to move the most, the most effectively, and then you focus on that, like, with a laser focus. And again, it's this sort of logic of efficiency or logic of just getting to 50% plus one. And I think it misses a bunch of things, right? One thing it misses is that most people's political views are not sort of, I sat down and I made a list of my values and I looked at the candidates and I decided amongst the candidates, this person matches me on 3 of the 5, so I'm going to vote for them this time instead of this other party who only matches me on 2 of the 5, right? That's not how most people approach politics, approach voting. And so, mostly, the people who move often from one election to another are not doing something like that. They're doing something like, things seem kind of bad, I'll vote out this guy and I'll vote in the other guy. Or things seem okay, I'll vote for the same party I voted for last time. Right. And that's not because they're dumb or because they're, bad people. It's because it does take a fair amount of effort to figure out among this list of options when you see people just, sort of fighting with each other on your television screen or on your Hulu ads or on your, whatever it is all the time. And it's, the other way people figure it out is they have a party allegiance and they stick to that party allegiance basically, unless something really radical happens. Trump did any number of really extreme, surprising, scary, awful, radical things and moved a few people out of the Republican Party, but not nearly as many as I might have expected or hoped. And I think people get their political views in large part from their communities and from political leaders. So, there's a study I quote in the book that shows that Republicans and Democrats completely switched their views on how hawkish we ought to be towards Russia during the Trump presidency, based entirely on sort of political leadership from the two parties, right? And so I think, all of that to say, I think it's entirely possible for Democratic politicians to speak from where I hope their values are, and I know many of their values are, about trans issues, about racial and economic justice, about whatever it is, and they'll lose a few people around the edges, but they'll also inspire a number of other people both to vote and hopefully to be more willing to volunteer to get, to talk to other people to bring them into voting as well.
So, yeah, that last point you make about bringing new voters in, right? Has it been your experience and your understanding largely that most campaigns are focused on high propensity voters? And again, that was something I mentioned, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's 2018 campaign that was modeled after the Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign, which is bring in people who don't typically vote. And particularly in New York 14, that was such a low turnout district that if you just mobilize a certain amount of people, you're able to pull off an upset. And she did. And I think a lot of progressive campaigns who are facing uphill battles in terms of funding have adopted a lot of that strategy. What is your opinion on that particular campaign strategy for leftist candidates in particular, but really even as a larger, broader strategy that can be adopted maybe by Democrats more towards the middle of the party?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, trying to get new people into voting is both potentially effective. There's some studies that get thrown around among campaign consultants and so on that show, if you move a voter from one side to the other, that's essentially twice as many votes for your side because the other side loses one versus bringing a new person in, right? I don't know if that math makes sense, but the idea is, if you take one away from the other side and bring it over to your side, you're doing a little bit better for yourself. So there's reasons that people are interested in moving people rather than bringing new people in. But I think they're, at the end of the day, sort of misguided. I think it is entirely possible to bring new people into voting, especially, again, if you have people. There's this great book called Mobilizing Inclusion by Lisa Garcia Badola, and Mitchelson is the last name of the other author, where they did experiments in communities in California, communities of color mostly. And if someone was the if someone could come to your door and say, it doesn't even really matter what they said, they found, but if someone looked like the person whose door they were knocking on, spoke the same language, could say they were a neighbor, they could increase turnout among people who'd never voted by up to 10 percentage points, which is a huge shift for that kind of work. So it's entirely possible. It's just not something that campaigns focus on, again, because they think there's sort of a conventional wisdom that it's not worth it, or that it won't work, or that it's too hard. The other thing they do that increases, there's a real inequality in who turns out to vote. So I think the other thing I think is that, trying to get out new voters also has the, side benefit, or maybe central benefit, of democratizing our democracy, right? Of making our electorate more representative of the country as a whole. Because it's disproportionately lower income, poor and working class people who are non-voters. So when you bring them in, you're bringing in, you're making the voters look more like the people. And I think that's worth doing on its own. I think it's also potentially effective for campaigns.
Yeah. And frankly, if the Democratic Party were smart, or if they were less, this is my opinion, if they were less, especially the old guard, connected with moneyed interests and the capitalist class, there would be a larger, I think, a more aggressive strategy of mobilizing poor voters, as opposed to focusing on these same suburban ones, which I think that focus in and of itself limits the party's platform. Because if you actually are trying to build a working class coalition, which is intersectional and which is community based, where you're going and knocking on doors with people that are based in the community and look like the people who they're speaking with, and are that's the best strategy. It seems obvious, but I feel that they are constrained by their own cowardice about confronting certain interests, and the just larger institutional issues, which comes from the platform, as well as you say, the makeup of the people on these campaigns.
Mm-hmm. I think that's part of it, and I think some of it is not I don't think there's a lot of people in the campaign world who are going, we are committed to the capitalist class, and so we have to do it this way versus that way, right? But what they're doing is they're looking around them and they're seeing everybody else says this is the way to do things, this is the way we've done things. Even if some of them, and I think it's true for many of them, their values would have them trying to bring new people in. If the consensus all around them is that that's not possible, or that's not worth it, or that's dangerous, then it's hard to be the person who tries to make that happen. One of the things I'm hoping that the book might do is I have a lot of people I talked with who had critiques of the way the campaign system works right now. Maybe they'll see that and see that they, if you're all just sort of trying not to be the one who says something new, maybe one of you could actually do that.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, can't thank you enough. Really appreciate your time today, Daniel. Daniel Laurison, am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, good. Associate Professor of Sociology at Swarthmore College and author of Producing Politics Inside the Exclusive Campaign World, where the privileged few shape politics for all of us. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Of course.